Hey there guys, welcome back for another Indomitus painting video. For this video, as you can see, I'm painting the Dark Angels Assault Intercessor from the Indomitus box set. Now I'll be showing you how I painted everything on this guy except for the hazard warning stripes on the chainsword, as they were sort of an addition after I finished filming for the video, and it's something that not everybody wants to do. It was just more of a personal touch thing, so that's the only thing that I didn't show. But I will be making a separate video showing on how to paint hazard stripes on chainswords at a little bit of a later date, so you can check that one out then. But without further ado, let's get started. Alright, so first of all, I've undercoated this with Abaddon black spray paint from Games Workshop, and I'm now going to take some Caliban green and give this a couple of thinned down coats over the entire model. So you can see here the paint's thin enough to apply and get a relatively even coat on, but a couple of coats will get it nice and even and cover up any of the little gaps that you'll get once the paint dries. I am being slightly careful with this, although this is designed to be a sort of a quick way of painting these intercessors. I am being a little bit careful with this first coat, as I'm trying to leave some black edges, some of the black undercoat in darker recesses and things like that. So I'm not going fully up to every edge. I'm leaving a little bit of a black shading in there, but I'm not too worried if I do touch some of the green in them areas, as I will be going in and black lining back over those areas anyway. So essentially I'm placing this over pretty much the entire model, apart from the base trim at the bottom of his boots. I leave those black, and obviously the back of his knees. Now you'll notice that I have taken off the arms and the backpack. This was just so I can get some easy access under his right arm, where the weapon pouch is, as it was a little bit close, and obviously behind the backpack. I'm painting these in the same manner, but I will show a little bit later on when I'm painting the chainsword and the weapon up, the bolt gun. But for now, everything else on the arms and the shoulder pads and stuff is done the same way as what I will show with the main figure here. So I'll get applying the rest of this, and we'll be back in just a bit. Right, so once the Caliban green has a couple of nice even coats on it, I'm now taking a 50-50 mix of Caliban green and Warpstone glow. You can see me here just mixing that up on the wet palette there. And all I'm going to do with this is just taking a small, I think it's the small dry brush from Army Painter, so it's the one with the slight angle, the chisel tip, and I'm just going to essentially dry brush this over the entire model, focusing more on the highlight areas. So yeah, there we go, small dry brush. So yeah, focusing more on the higher areas where the light will catch. So sort of the helmet, the top part of his bent thigh there, as well as the back of his lower calf, and then obviously the same with the arms and that as well. Although this looks a little bit bright going on, it does sort of dry down and dull down a little bit. I didn't want to do the typical dry brushing with just the Warpstone Glow, as I think that tends to look more towards the Salamander's paint scheme rather than the Dark Angels, although I do like the Dark Angels a little bit brighter with the highlights. I don't like the extreme sort of, you know, super bright highlights in contrast to the super dark green, so I like a bit more of a blend with it. So all I'm doing here is taking the paint onto the brush, and then when it goes off screen I've just got a bit of paper towel down on my thigh and I'm just sort of dabbing it off and wiping off the excess there. So I'm not going straight from palette to the miniature here, but I'm not wiping you know, 100% of the paint off and getting it fully dry. This is a little bit more paint than the typical dry brush, but yeah, just enough to get some highlights on there. Alright, so I'll just finish dry brushing this and we'll be back in just a moment. And welcome back, guys. So after the dry brushing is done, I'm now taking some of the pure Warpstone, and obviously this is with the wet palette, so it does put up a little bit of moisture, so it's not thinned down too much, but just a little bit. And all I'm doing with this is the first layer of edge highlights. So again, picking off anywhere sort of that I want them, really. I'm not one to go and edge highlight every little edge. I think that looks a little bit too much, a little bit too extreme. So the majority of my edge highlights are pretty much anywhere where the light would catch, so any of the sort of most open areas, and then with the Warpstone Glow I will actually go into some of the areas that would be in shadow and edge highlight some of those areas as well, just to represent the sharpness of the corners and things like that, the edges, picking up reflective light. So it's, you know, even in shadow you will get some reflective highlights, so it's always good to put a few, but you don't have to go mental with it. So as you can see here, I'm using a very fine brush. This is just a cheap brush. I think this came in a pack of 10 for about £3. It's a Baldermere brush from The Works, which is like a small hobby store here in the UK. I think the size of this one is a 00, maybe a 50, but it's got a nice point to it, and it's great for doing some of these highlights. So again, I'll go around the entire model, placing these where the light is going to catch the most. Obviously things like the rim just under his neck here, or under his chin, as well as the mohawk, I suppose you could call it, on his head, tops of the knees, as well as the gap between the knee cap and the shin guard. You got that little gap that's just underneath, and I'll run a line under there just to separate that. You can see that here now. So just very carefully trying to keep the line as thin as possible. So once again, I'll go around and place all these highlights, and we'll be back for the next step. Alright, so the next step is to take some Nuln oil, and as I mentioned earlier, I'm just going to run this into any of the recesses. Now I'm using the same fine brush that I used before, as I'm not coating the model in this. I want to get it just in those those gaps. So as you can see, just under the knee here, in any of the sort of the gaps around where you've got these little square panel cutouts and things like that. And the reason I'm using non-oil rather than sort of a wash made of black, or you know, like a thin down Abaddon black or anything, is that it does flow into those recesses nice and easy. And if any does go on an outside edge, because it doesn't dry too quick and it doesn't stain as much as a regular paint, that I can just wipe it off easily, or use it as a bit of a shadow area depending on where I'm placing it. So obviously I'll go around and run this everywhere, sort of around his knees, the plates between his boots here, under the first plate of his chest piece, anywhere basically that is raised and has an edge, we'll get this non-oil in there. And like I say, it's just a thin line. I may apply a couple of times in there to get a bit more. Obviously the larger the longer the area, the more it will need in there to make sure it covers the distance or the length. And obviously I'm doing this the same with the arms and the backpack as well, so there's nothing different with those. I'm just not, you know, boring you guys with showing the same thing on those as well. It's just being careful not to get it on any areas that I don't want. This model he actually took just over an hour to do, including the stripes. Like I said, I'll leave those out. This is designed to be a bit of a quick battle ready style, although personally I'm not great at sticking to that style, and I always tend to put in a little more detail than is needed. For example, I'll go in with an extra layer of edge highlights on this. If you want battle ready, then don't bother with that. The same with the leather on the pouch. If you don't want to go too detailed with that, then just some brown and a single highlight is enough on that. And then obviously the same with the stripes on the chainsword. If you're not into those, or if you're wanting battle ready and you don't want to fiddle about with an extra 10 minutes of painting those, then leave those off as well. So we'll skip on and take a look at the next step. And welcome back, guys. So next up I'm going to take some Rhinox hide, and I'm using this as a base layer for all of the leather pouches and the strap that goes around his waist here. So once again, just applying an even coat over it all. Now this is base paint, and so I've thinned it down very slightly, just a touch of water on the brush, but this will only take the one coat, as it is a dark paint going over black, and so it covers really well with the base paints from the Citadel range, with only 1 or 2 layers needed. Right, so I'll just get this done, and we'll come back once I'm done with this. Okay, so next I'm going to take some Doombull Brown, and this is just to highlight all of the leather areas. So again, just edge highlighting. If you're doing a purely speed paint battle ready figure, then this is pretty much the last step you'll need for the leather on here. However, as I mentioned earlier, I tend to go a little bit over the top even when trying to keep it as simple as possible, and I will actually go in and give this more of a worn weather look, but I will show you those steps just in case it is something that you guys want to do with your models. But yeah, basically I'm just taking this with, again, the fine brush, the detail brush, and just edge highlighting all of the edge of the leather. Now, if you find that this is a bit bright for of a highlight for you, you can mix it in 2 parts of this to 1 part Rhinox hide, and that will dull it down a little bit, or you can thin it with a little bit of water and make it a little bit more transparent so that the Rhinox hide shows through a little bit. But just bear in mind that this does sort of darken up or dull down a little bit as it dries. It goes on quite bright and then dries a little bit darker. So just being careful to try and keep the lines thin and neat and nice and straight. But we'll jump on and take a look at the next step once this is done. Okay, so for the final sort of detail highlight on the leather here, I'm taking some Zandri dust, and as I mentioned earlier, you can skip this step, but this is just to give a little bit of that chipped away leather look. Obviously as leather dries out, it tends to split and crack, which is where you get that sort of orangey reddish, orangey brown type look, and then as it sort of splits away even further, becomes a little bit more worn and sort of sun dried, you tend to get this sort of paler highlight to the cracks and splits and stuff, which is what I'm adding here. So this isn't an edge highlight as such, it's more I'm sort of dotting it on and slightly feathering it just into the flatter surface of the leather, and it's not covering sort of, you know, top to bottom of a line. It is broken up slightly, focusing a little bit more on areas that are going to see a little bit more wear and tear, so things like corners, where the flap is, you know, where it's going to get folded up more, and edges and things like that. So you won't find too much of this on the flat surface of itself, but you will get some, especially on older leather. It sort of tends to dry and flake away, sort of as it dries, it cracks and splits, and then that tends to sort of curl up a little bit, and that will do that on flat surfaces as well. So it's okay to put a small amount of this sort of along there, sort of dotted around a little bit, but you don't want to go overboard with it. With this, it's definitely a case of less is more. And just to finish the effect on the leather off, and to sort of dull it down a little bit, I'm just taking a thin glaze of the Rhinox hide and just applying that over all of the leather again, just to bring that sort of that brightness down a little bit. And you can see it gives a really nice effect to the leather there. So once again, this is a skip that can be avoided, sorry, a step that can be skipped if you're just looking to get some marines on the table, but if you want a little bit more detail, then obviously you can do this. But we'll jump on and take a look at the next step. Right, and while I have the Zandri dust out, I'm just going to apply this over the Aquila here, not being too careful, just sort of getting an even coat on there. And I'll also apply this to the paper part of the purity seal that he has on his leg at the bottom, as well as the company marking on his left knee pad. My marines are all from 5th Company, so that's the cross-checkered emblem with the green in the top right, the black in the bottom left, and then the bone in the top left and bottom right. Right, so next up I'm going to take some Mephiston red and apply this over the button in the middle of his belt, as well as the red wax for the purity seal. And also here I'll now show where I'm focusing a little bit more on the weapons. So obviously with the gun, it's the top portion I do with the red, and then everything else apart from the grip will be in the bolt gun metal, and then the grip itself will be left with the Abaddon black and just a little bit of highlight. With red, although this is a base colour, it does take a couple of layers to get to the right colour. It is slightly thinned down, but red tends to be a little bit less opaque than some other colours, and so the black darkens it up a little bit and shows through. So just a couple of coats on this, and that will be the reds done. You'll notice as well that I also leave the sights on this black, so I'm just being careful to go around those. In regards to any other areas that are red, it's just the small button that he has on his wrist, and then I also dot these into the lenses, obviously for his eyes. So we'll just skip to showing the sword so that you can see where I place the red on that, and then we can move on to the next step. Okay, and with the chainsword, it's just this small sort of section around the exhaust vent there, leaving the exhaust vent black. The reason I did this was because at the time I was intending to just have the chainsword black with some highlights, and then obviously the metal teeth, but I then decided to put in the hazard stripes. But either way, I think it just breaks up the black of the sword a little bit, so you know, I do recommend putting that on there, or you could do the entire blade itself red and then leave this part black. Obviously that's personal choice. I'm not 100% sure if there's any right or wrong when it comes to how Dark Angel's weapons look, but at the end of the day there are models, and so there are choices. As long as you got the majority of the paint scheme right, so the greens and the company emblems, then as far as anything else goes, you know, take free reign on it. Do what you want and what you think looks best. So we'll just jump on to the next step, and then there's not too much more left, guys. Right, so next up I'll go and take some lead belcher, and this will be applied to the teeth of the chainsword here, as well as the small rivet that's at the top there. I don't do that at the moment, as I now decided that I wanted to do the hazard stripes, and so as the paint would go over the top of that, I'll apply that little bit of bolt gun metal once the stripes are painted in. Also, obviously, I will paint this onto the bolt gun, as well as the two exhaust circular exhaust parts of the backpack, and the 4 small exhaust vents on the bottom of the backpack. So once this is done, we'll jump back now and take a look at applying a wash to this, as well as the Aquilia. Right, so for the wash on this, just some Agravax Earthshade, and obviously I'm going to apply this quite heavily over the Aquilia, getting it into all of the recesses between the feathers there. And once this has dried, I will go in and highlight this with a slight dry brushing of bleached bone. However, you can, if you are obviously painting this quick, just leave it like this. I didn't record the bleach bone part, as it is an extra step, and at this point I thought the video's going long enough. You know, you guys have got the gist of what I'm painting and how I'm painting it. So just applying some Agrax to the red areas, and then I'll let this dry, and then I'll just add those extra bit of details, and the model is done. Right, and there we have it, guys. So all I've done in terms of extra highlights on this, as I mentioned, just a little bit of highlighting on the Aquila with some bleached bone. I also applied a coat of Retributor armor on the emblem on his wrist there, and then a small bit of Evil Sun's Scarlet just as an edge highlight on the red areas. So nothing too complicated. You know, it would have taken maybe 5 seconds of video. So there we go, guys. Thanks a lot for joining me. I hope you've enjoyed the video. Obviously I am still learning about this whole video processing, how to make videos and things like that, so forgive me if they're not up to the quality that you may be used to with some of the more established channels. But I do appreciate you guys returning or checking out my videos. If you did enjoy the video, hit that like button, and if you're not already subscribed, hit that subscribe button, and ding that little bell for notifications of when videos go live. My Indomitus series is obviously every Wednesday. Once I've painted up the Indomitus set, I'll probably change that into or expand that onto a 40k in general series, and the every Monday is Mortal Realms Monday, focusing on obviously the Mortal Realms magazine. So mainly focusing on the Night Haunts and the Stormcast Eternals there. But eventually, obviously, that will evolve into a Age of Sigmar playlist, I suppose you could call it, or I will do a separate playlist, but that will expand into other Age of Sigmar models. But there we go, guys. If there's anything in this video that you would like to see in more detail, for example, the painting the hazard stripes, basing, or you know, anything in general, doesn't necessarily have to be from this video, let me know down in the comments. You know, I need inspiration and motivation from you guys, and to see your comments, and especially the positive ones, but you know, even the negative ones, they do motivate me. They encourage me to improve what I'm doing, and to try and produce better videos and things like that. So thanks a lot, guys. Take it easy, and until next time, keep painting those minis.